Just thank you for joining us on the October session of the Loop User Group. And I will say this, I think we should plan to have a session on the calendar not too long after Microsoft Ignite, because there definitely will be some good news to discuss and talk about then. So handing over to Scott. Thank you, Scott, for being with us.
Yeah, no problem. So hi you all. Thank you for joining. And very much as Darryl mentioned today, we're going to look through the lens of project management and using Microsoft Loop. So it is a different type of topic because I guess, much like many people that are experiencing Loop, we see different components, right, of Loop, and bringing them all together sometimes can be a bit of a challenge in thinking, well, how can I apply all of these different components and capabilities to bring it together in a project management perspective, especially, people here might be working with other user groups, maybe teams internally, then this is a good way to kind of show Loop. I know when I've explained it to others and just point at a Loop component in a Teams message, sometimes it can create a little bit of confusion effectively of how all that works. It's really important from this side of things is looking at as a potential approach with project management and in Loop. And I'm going to be kind of stepping through some scenarios, and you can take today pieces of it. You might want to take them all and share them wider, and obviously looking for a lens of project management. So very much mentioned today is all around project management, and we're going to be covering some areas such as ideas for projects, meeting minutes, workspaces, and more as well, going through the Loop app and looking at it through the lens of the browser. And very briefly, because I am not here to sell anything, you'll be pleased to know there is no sell. But for those who haven't spoken to me before, my name's Scott, and I head up a company called Inspire Cloud, and also on socials as your 365 coach. And very much Microsoft 365 is one of the kind of passion areas. I really like the tech. I have done for a number of years when I started out working in SharePoint about 12 years ago, and then I've just went from app to app all the way through that time. So very much Loop is one of those apps that we're also pretty keen and passionate on using as well and seeing great use cases for. And that pretty much is me. I'm not going to do any additional sell, and we're not here to learn all about me. Luckily, my children are popped out for the hour, so you shouldn't have any background noise anyway. 3-year-old and 6-year-old always have the means to make a lot of background noise in most of my meetings, and testing out Teams capability for noise cancellation is always a good thing. So manage projects with Loop, and notice the question mark in there, because I do appreciate that for some, we don't really know if Loop is a tool that can do this, right? And I appreciate that we've had, look at some of our comments on the YouTube video really posted on this topic. We get, good ones and ones which are, for me, like this one, are actually really good comments. They look at it for a lens of actually, is that a negative comment about what we're doing? No, it's really not. I think these comments here that are actually on the channel and on our content. The first is, you can't use Loop for project management in 2023. Let's not deceive ourselves, right? Loop is immature for this. Maybe in 2 years, or if they buy Notion, being Microsoft, this will work. Or on the other side is, the whole idea of adding another app into this is just insane. And I really get these points, because when you're looking it through here, you kind of wonder, well, is Loop a project management app? Can it do really resource management, task planning? Well, the answer to that is, well, no. It's not designed to be the next Microsoft project, right? And equally, is it another app in effectively the sphere of what we can use in 365 to do another thing? And the answer to that is no. The way Loop works is it's integrating itself into the apps that we use daily and allowing us to bring that into our flow of how we work, rather than saying, hey, go click on the Loop icon and go create yourself something there. It's very much bringing it in to what we use today. And so that brings us entirely to the elephant in the room. Project, as well as other apps are out there on the wider marketplace, because of course people then say, well, if I use Loop to do some of my project management, do I then uninstall Project? Do I remove apps like Notion? And of course, I'm saying no. We're not saying here that what we're going to be covering today is to do advanced resource planning inside of Loop. Really, what we're saying here is the way Loop works, and as we hopefully all know as well, is it integrates in the apps that we use daily, into Teams, into Outlook, also into some of the online apps like Word as well, allowing us to get content and copy it through those apps, keeping that synchronization of a project spec or a task list in one place, that we don't have to then copy and paste it into 4 locations, get all the replies back, and then update the master copy. We've all been there, and it takes us hours and hours to do. So by bringing Loop and that capability into projects, will equally save a lot of time when we're looking at it through the lens of a project by reducing the amount of rework. Absolutely keep your project plans in any app that you choose. That's not an issue here, but we're looking at that kind of wraparound that we all do day to day when it comes to project management. So on that point, that is exactly what this slide here was really saying. This is the actual official Microsoft blurb that was out in the world of Microsoft Loop way back when we started off with Loop components. Loop allows you to collaborate in the flow of your work. Effectively, it's going to appear in apps like Teams, Outlook, Word, Whiteboard, the Loop app, and obviously we're seeing in other apps like OneNote in the future, and stuff's going to be seen. So that's actually appearing in apps that we use daily. And behind me here, just mentioning that, you know, allows you to create content and sync from different apps. And that's really is one of the biggest benefits that we're going to see today, creating that content, sharing it with others, syncing it back into a single workspace, preventing the need to do a lot of rework. So very much today, you know, when we look at Loop, and in today's demo, I'll certainly show you some of these areas here. You know, the ideation, as I call it. So, you know, very much at the start of a project, if you're anything like me, you might be speaking to a customer, one of your colleagues who brings you in and says, we're looking at this new initiative for our company, and we need you to bring together a team and some ideas for it. At that point, it's not a project, right? You haven't been the actual given the go-ahead to go and get a PO number, start booking time, start having invoices generated. But the idea starts there, and you need somewhere to log that idea. That equally today might be in OneNote. Maybe you'll create a Microsoft team. But at this point, you'll need to start creating some content, some ideas, some of that drafts that you need to work out to bring the project forward. So where do we store that? And that's something to have a look at, how we could do that in Loop. Equally, we need somewhere then to bring together these ideas. We shouldn't have all of our kind of Loop components and content spread out all over the place. Let's bring it together into one project workspace using Microsoft Loop. The ability to have content sync is super important. To take a piece of content and sync it across apps like Teams chat, definitely one of those where you can take your project spec, wording, share it with a colleague, get feedback, but have it all sync back. Apps like Planner, and I do see, and I work with teams today that, you know, don't use project, because project comes with cost and complexity that they don't really want. But they might be using Planner to run one of their small projects. While Planner's a great app to do that, comes as part of 365, and actually bringing it into Loop, which is a fairly recent enhancement that we'll have a look at today, is also something that you can do, which is quite neat in your workspace to make your Planner plan appear inside of Loop. And extend out apps like Jira and Trello. Again, more of a recent enhancement. We'll look at that today in terms of what is possible. But if you have a board in Trello, I can bring that into Loop, sync it so you and your team have access. And behind me, as you can see here, project minutes. We have effectively meetings with our project team. There are tasks, minutes, notes to take. What app do we use there? Do we go and use OneNote? Do we use Word, start jotting down those points? Well, again, Loop can help with that job and bring that back into our workspace later. So there's plenty of capability there that Loop can help with. And what we're now going to do is step through, like here, let's loop back into a demo and kind of step through some of those scenarios using Loop through the browser. But I'm happy, you know, if we pause there, has anyone got any thoughts, questions before we dive into a demo? Cool, good stuff. Awesome. So let's go ahead and open up Loop. Now, I have created one of these earlier in case we do need to step back if have any technical issues in one of my demo tenants as such. But for many of you, of course, we'll start right from the top inside of the Microsoft Loop web app, going over to loop.microsoft.com. And from here, if we had that concept, we start right at the beginning. We've got an idea. You've been brought into a team meeting. You're speaking to someone and say, hey, we need to pull together a project. Well, we're not really sure where we go from here, right? Well, you can certainly fire at OneNote, or you can take your trusty notepad that I have in front of me and begin scribbling down all of that content. But actually what we could do using Loop to help us out is we could head over to the Ideas tab, and effectively we could create a new idea. Now, when we go ahead and then create a new idea in here, we get our blank untitled page. Not going to save us any time, but you may have seen out at the bottom that you do have a template gallery now with a number of templates that you can select from. So instead of having to go through and put your headings and all your content in there, you could drop in and select project brief at the bottom, and you already get a pre-designed project brief to start capturing your content. Again, you might save 5 to 10 minutes of time when you're using these actual templates. Allows us to come in here and use some of the inbuilt components that come as part of the template. But here, this can save you quite a bit of time, because again, you can say, well, okay, what's the project overview? Okay, well, we might have an idea of this. So I'll put here project brief, and I've got some content in a separate screen on another machine here I'm running. So I'm going to go ahead and copy some content over for our project spec. Again, we'll just delete that, and I'll just go ahead and paste in my project overview. So straight away, we're beginning to create our content. Our goals, of course, could be development of the app we're working on, so development of the Loopy app, etc., etc. But the idea here is, well, we've got somewhere now that we can take. I put for the Loopy app. We've got effectively content here inside of Loop as an idea that we can then take later and share with others. But equally at this point, you may then say, well, actually, this is the project scope, right? This is our overview that we've got at the moment. And it'd be really useful to take this content and share it with others, because typically after our first ideas meeting, you'll be given a bit of a rough guide as some of your project spec and where you need to go. Well, we can go ahead and create a Loop component from this content and then share it with your team to get synced back in place. Now here we're using the default tenant sharing, which is effectively org-wide, the simplicity approach to Loop in that way. But we can go ahead and effectively we can copy the component, right? Take that component or copy it, and then we can share it with others. So as we now know, right, we are going to go into Outlook, we're going to go into Teams, and we're going to end up copy and pasting loads of stuff and asking for replies back from the team. But of course, then we're using Loop, we can start saving a bit of time here again. So if I fire up my Outlook app here and I open up project spec review I've already got created, I can then go ahead and then paste in the actual Loop component, and it will actually go through and display. I'll just go through and try and get hold of my cursor here. Just put another one. The joys of live demos in terms of using versions of Outlook that I've just changed back from the preview back, so Outlook's not playing ball. But very much as this just takes its time to load, we can look at it through Teams as well, that we can actually go into a chat message, we can go through, we can paste in that component, and we can generate it and then share it with our colleagues. Very simple in this way. But then our colleagues, because we've granted access to this component, can begin to type in, make changes live into this content and sync it straight back into our project spec idea that we had initially. So, you know, the question would be, well, Scott, where is this kind of saving us time? Well, we had the idea page straight from Loop. We had a pre-designed page. I didn't spend 10 minutes creating myself. I took the content that we took for the project spec from my own meeting with my manager, and I've shared it straight to the Loopy app developers to say, hey guys, we're happy with this spec, make any changes, and it will sync back into that Loop component that me and the team can later access. Quick time saver, saves copy and pasting into email and Teams, having 5 versions of the truth, and you need to collate all that later. So that's a quick win there when we look at it from a project lens. Any questions, thoughts before we go in a little bit deeper in some of this capability? Oh, awesome. So then we need to think a little bit wider. Yeah, we started off in here with our Loop project brief. We had our page, but we need to then consider, well, how do we now have a shared workspace where we can share more content than just a single page, right? What we can then do is we can consider creating a new workspace. Now, it's very simple. You know, most on this call would have already seen this today. Go back into your Loop homepage. On the workspace tab, you can click add a new workspace and give it a name of your choice. Okay, very simple enough to do. And we'll end with something along the lines of like what we've got here, which is actually what we're going to go and build now and take you through that process of. You will end with a workspace that we can begin sharing with others and creating the content from. And here is one we just started off with. So in terms of our actual workspace, the question will be, well, how can I add and remove others to my workspace? You can click into the workspace member and begin to add in your colleagues. So in this one, maybe Nestor as a director will need access into here. So I'll bring in Nestor, who can share the workspace. And we may also be dealing with Miriam, who's also helping us out inside of our Loop workspace. So we've created a workspace and sharing it with others as well. But we need to consider that we really had that first instance from our ideas here. If I click on the ideas tab, we see the project brief for the Loopy app, which we just created, right? What we can now do is take this project brief and I can actually bring it in to our workspace. Okay, so I don't have to recreate this again, copy and paste the components back across. I can bring it in and bring it into the Loopy app for Android, which is our other workspace we've just created. That brings it quite nicely as a link into that navigation tree for our actual workspace that we've just effectively created. Let's find the right one I'm working on. Bad naming convention and the way I can't see them all here. So I'll just get the right one on the screen. But we then see project brief for the Loopy app as a link that's been added. Now, it is key to make sure that the page security, of course, you may have to look at creating a page link to ensure people have relevant access. But we've got it nicely, at least at the moment, inside of that navigation for the workspace. So we can take your existing ideas and bring them in to that Loop workspace. But thinking wider, of course, is, well, hey, Scott, this project is going to have different areas that we need to consider. Do we all stick it on one large page, or can we start this kind of idea of effectively, much like we do in Teams, right? We're starting to break out the work into different streams, into different channels of ideas. Well, we can do much the same in our Loop workspace. So here we could go and add ourselves a new Loop page. So I'll go ahead and create a new Loop page, and we need to get cracking with a project plan. That's super important. So here we're going to put planning as our title. And for those, of course, that's used Loop before, we can add a nice cover page for now, a range of Microsoft templates, not like the 10 or so we had before. So I can now go ahead and use the range that we've got to create a nice cover page. And in here, we now need to create a plan. And this goes back to, well, Loop doesn't do planning. Yep, I agree. But Microsoft Planner has planning capability. So instead, we can now effectively go ahead and bring in our Microsoft Plan. Now, if I do click on the /, and maybe the product team already made this change before, but yeah, you can see there is no planner, right? There is no planner option showing there on the screen. So what we can do, and one I've created earlier, I've already went and created a new Microsoft Plan for the Loopy app development. The Microsoft Planner we've got created in 365. And what I'll go ahead and do is copy the link effectively to this plan. And inside of our Loop Planner, we'll go ahead and paste that link straight into the page in Loop. And then as if by magic, the planner has now been integrated and added into the Loop page. Okay, it's recognized it's a Microsoft plan and it's brought it straight into the page. So this is quite powerful because this is a window into your plan, but it also means you can actually go in and start updating the plan. So it's not a read-only copy. You can actually come in here and add additional tasks, update them, and assign work. So this is a synchronized view of your plan directly through your Loop page. Now, there is a consideration here. I didn't really go too much in the YouTube video if you had actually, if you've seen that, because it's a bit of effectively a bit of a rabbit hole you can go down. But of course, it's super important to know about security. So if you're not a member of the plan, you will not be able to see this planner component on the page. Okay, so the group security that sits behind the Microsoft Planner is very important. Consider they need to have access to the plan to effectively see it on the Loop page. Now, you can quite easily fix that, right? If you're a group owner, you can go into the members and you can begin to add colleagues. You can do that. But just noting, of course, the trade-off there is if you've got associated resources like Teams and files in Teams, that is also going to be sharing that content wider as part of that group. So it's a key point to note there. But I obviously hope that you might have a team or a group for this particular area. Bring your planner in by pasting the link, and then you can have direct access here inside of your Loop page. So yeah, this is certainly pretty cool capability. And again, bringing that kind of point of, well, if my plan's in Planner and I'm in the Loop app, do I have to have another tab for the planner? No, keep it all in sync, keep it all within your Loop workspace. You can easily do that now. So that's very cool capability. But I also do understand that planning is not always done by Planner. In my world, it is, because I really use 365. If anyone else tells me the route, oh no, use Planner, right? But of course, we do have apps like Trello, we have apps like Jira, and we can also integrate those into our Loop pages. So unlike Planner here, where I just pasted that link and brought it into my Loop page, now instead I can hit on effectively the / key to bring up the action type menu. We can then scroll down and we can add other apps, i.e. Jira and Trello. Hopefully we'll see more in the future, right? If I go ahead and then click into Trello, here it has already integrated to my Trello account because I've actually already signed in before today. You don't want to see me inputting a username and password, right? So I've already done that. So it's already pre-authenticated to Trello. It then shows you all the Trello boards that you're part of. I have a board called Project Zero Tasks. What I can then do is click on Import, and it will bring my Trello board into the Loop page. Okay. Now, is this a copy of the Trello board? No, it is effectively a synchronized view from Trello into your Loop page. So it's not copying it, allowing you to have two versions. It's a fully synchronized copy. That does mean, as you can see here, Scott B at, and when I click into it, the security model here is using Trello, right? So if I go and allocate one of these board tasks to the team, I'm going to be using the Trello authentication and the members of the Trello board, where I'm going to be given effectively task 2. But it does also mean, again, that you can actually step into these tasks and you can add descriptions, select due dates and so forth, which syncs straight back into Trello. And similar capability is also available in Jira as well. So you then might say, well, okay, I get it. But really what we're trying to do here for Planner and Jira and Trello is stop that idea of having another web page open with your Trello app and your Trello board and then making changes there. Create that synchronized copy inside of Trello, inside of Loop that you brought in, that syncs back into Trello and keeps it all in that single place, make it a lot easier for you to manage. So it's not all about Planner. Certainly Trello capability in there as well. And I'm happy to just take a pause there on that kind of area of kind of planning and around bringing in your planning capability, because of course there is also capability for Microsoft to do, right? There is also a task list. That hasn't gone away. It's not like saying, well, Planner's here now. Does that mean that the task list component that was already there inside of our actual Loop capabilities has gone away? Absolutely not. There is effectively a task list in here that you can still certainly utilize. And for those who haven't actively used that before, yes, that's not Planner. That is something we're creating specifically here in Loop. But the good news is, this also, as we'll see here, arrange financing with Nestor, will also sync back into Microsoft ToDo, much like your Planner tasks do as well. So if I allocate this to Alex, who's the account I'm logged into, and I'll select a due date for later on this week, within a moment or two, that task will also sync back into Microsoft ToDo for the assigned persons. So if I open up ToDo here, say it can take a minute or two sometimes to come through. There we go, arrange financing with Nestor, assigned to me through planning. So we can actually see there that we've even got that capability of doing a basic task list if we're not using Planner or we're using Trello. Well, we can create a basic task list with assignment and sync those into Microsoft ToDo. And again, I'll sync back into our task list very handily in Loop. So there is some great planning capability, but very much as we can see there, we have a few more options than what we've seen in the past. Any questions, thoughts on that before we move on to the next part for this around some content creation as well? Cool.
Yeah,
All good.
Scott, I
Awesome.
think
Mhm.
I'll just add one in there. I know you talked a bit about
Sure.
it, that importance of making sure that the plan
Mhm.
is shared with the people in the workspace. I think that
Mhm.
is something of a barrier for most early adopters or people that are learning to think in loop dimensions. It almost becomes like a 4D chess challenge, doesn't it? Where you're bringing something into a place where people are working and you're wanting to share it, but you've also got to make sure that you're sharing it with the appropriate link.
Mm.
Um, do you have any thoughts or tips around um, what is a good way as a starting point to make sure that you're going to remember to keep sharing things with people in the workspace?
Yeah, it's one of those things because, like you say, you're creating a separate security model you need to keep in sync, right? And I think it can come down to, and hopefully, we see this in the future. I don't know the mechanics of how, and equally, I don't work for Microsoft, so I can't say, hey, we'll go do it. But it would be nice to see closer integration with Loop and Teams, right? Because I'd fully appreciate that we need somewhere to store our files, really, and we want that element. We've always said for years, Teams. Well, we said SharePoint, and then we said Teams. So close integration would certainly help because you would want, your Loop workspace to kind of close this very nicely where you're storing your files in Teams. I think ultimately it's probably one of those use cases where if you are bringing people into your workspace in Loop, i.e. through the workspace members tab, then also ensuring that you're bringing them into your group/team to ensure they have shared access to your content. But we're working with customers at the moment, very much they're using those tools natively. So they are adding people into those groups and teams quite organically. So it's probably one of those just as a point upon his change management to understand, but they should probably be doing it if they're already doing teams and groups right now anyway, bringing people in. Cool. Awesome. So on that point, though, we need to consider something else that's happened more recently in Loop, and that's code blocks, right? So how could we kind of bring code blocks and stuff into this idea of a project? Well, if you are working on technical projects and do have development teams that's doing scripts and the like, you're also going to want somewhere to store some of that content that you have access to, maybe as a team collaboratively. And much the same in Loop is now we can do that. Now, again, if we're taking this kind of concept of projects, well, would I then add a code block onto my planning page? Well, probably not, because in that sense, we want to create a nice signpost experience for people to use Loop and use it for projects. So what we could then do is add another page into our workspace. And this time we can call it, effectively developments. So developments and scripts. We could again give it a nice icon, etc. Give it a nice cover page for development, just to give it a nice look and feel for the team. We'll just go ahead and just use one of these as an example. But then we have to consider, well, can we bring code blocks in, and what's that experience look like for us as kind of end users? Well, like, once again, in here, we can click on the / icon and we can do a code block. So under here in the drop down, we now see code. When we select code, we now have the ability to change from a range of different languages with the appropriate markup. Now, I already have some HTML I've generated using ChatGPT, right? It's not used as a live app, don't worry, that there's nothing proprietary in our HTML here. But very much if we go to the HTML, what we can then do is copy through some of our code. Now in ChatGPT, it's already been fully marked up, right? So are we going to paste code here? It looks like a notepad file. And we won't have seen that before. Well, no, we can actually see we're doing the appropriate markup in the code block. So it's very useful here again. If I show all lines, we've got some content here where I could now, at the top say, here's the source code for the HTML site. Okay, so as a team member, I went and created that content. Well, also, as we know now, what we can then do, which is quite powerful, is, well, I can take this content and create a component from this code block. And I could then take that to the development team and say, this is the code we're working on at the moment. So again, if we choose that as a kind of live example here, here's our Loop app developers chat thread that we've got going on with our developers. Well, easily I can go ahead and then paste in. So if I actually copy the components, it would be helpful if I get too far ahead. Copy the components, and then we'll go ahead and bring that into our Teams chat message and wait for that just to catch up. As we can see loading, and there again is our code block. So that also provides that experience in this scenario, at least for an app development, where we now have the ability to go and update our code. We can even change the language if that's what we want to do later. So it's quite powerful that you'll be able to take, again, a component of a code block on one of your projects and then effectively bring that into one of your chats, one of your effectively emails is quite powerful as well. So certainly useful to use. And it's a more recent enhancement inside of Loop, but again, very powerful to use for that type of projects. Maybe you've got PowerShell scripts and the like, and you want to put them somewhere. A great place to do that, of course, is here and then share them out with you and your colleagues later. Pick it up, take a copy, make adjustments, and keep it all inside of Loop as well. So any kind of questions there on the kind of code block capabilities there as well? I know Daryl's answering a lot of questions in chat as well. I can see that in the background. Any other questions around that, what we just had a look at there?
There wasn't any from a code block perspective, but some good questions from Schneller about looking at when Planner's used, the two ways that we're seeing it, we're either taking the full plan as a link and dropping it into the page, or that starting point of it as a task list that then becomes Planner and ToDo. So yeah, two entry points there, which I can see can feel a little confusing, but in one sense, it's the quick starting point, create a task list, and then it becomes the plan, or you've already got a plan and you're just expanding on that.
100% right. I think it's a great idea that to-do list could be really powerful at the start of this kind of planning phase. Just, arrange, because we've all been there, arrange the PO number, before you can even start booking time or putting your resources on it. Well, a very simple task list can be very good for that, because if you are using Microsoft To-Do and you're tagging your colleagues or even yourself in there, it's going to end up on your to-do list rather than just end up like as a post-it note on your desk to get it done later, because you may not need the full plan then. And I do know some teams and businesses you work with, they won't actually even consider the project, i.e. the team is being created for the project, unless it's been authorized. So really having that simple ability to create a task list on the page here, keep it in To-Do and sync it out, could be very powerful before you move into a Microsoft plan and expand on your planner capabilities.
Matt does have a question there in chat about
Oh, Daryl, you went on mute there.
That's right. So Matt's question about the the code block. Can you embed an iframe, GitHub, or Azure DevOps so that the code is in proper version control system? I think, Matt, that actually talks to what Loop have opened up now, which is a developer program, and trying to encourage third-party, even first-party apps internally to create your Loop adaptive cards. And the goal really there is what can be developed so that it comes through and is actually in that fluid, updatable framework rather than iframing stuff in. Yeah, I mean, iframes they're convenient, but they also come with their own complexities and messiness. So we can hope that GitHub or Azure DevOps will also follow suit, and there'll be a adaptive card or a way of bringing a Loop experience, and dropping a board in from Azure DevOps would be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely 100%. Awesome. And then, so just to then move forward, and obviously this is an area that I think has a lot of interest, and you may have discussed in your previous sessions as well, is all around meeting notes, because You know, it's one of those things we all do in all of our meetings. We're generally taking minutes or notes, but it doesn't really matter in our role. We sometimes say, hey, can you take a note of that? Or we follow up after the meeting, please, with the tasks that need doing. And that is obviously something that happens on projects all the time. So, you know, are there ways in Loop that we can achieve this for our workspace? Well, yes, you know, there are multiple ways and little endpoints we can come into here. And before I show you what I feel is a new and better way, obviously you may want to come in here and create yourself a new page. And in the page, you may then effectively want to create something for meeting notes. And there's handily at the bottom of the screen, you can select meeting notes. You can bring that in here as an update as you go through your meeting. You can go through, add the attendees, add agenda points and notes. And this is a pre-configured template, again, with components. So it's quite powerful because, again, you go into a meeting, and if you're anything like me with a notepad, you might be looking for a blank page, start up your structure. Well, this gives you your structure straight away. So it's quite powerful to do that. However, though, this is still not that intuitive. It still feels a bit like one note in the way. It's providing that capability. So is there a different way that we can now use? And the answer is yes. We can use the new Loop capabilities to deliver meeting notes and minutes and tasks from a meeting inside of Microsoft Teams. Now, to achieve that, we actually need to do it through the Teams app. So, Darryl, correct me if I'm wrong, it's still not in Outlook. It's Teams only at the moment to get to actually enable this capability. And in that, we can actually do is go into our Teams calendar, and we can go ahead and create ourselves a new meeting. So here I could put a meeting a little later on today. And in here, we have an online meeting that's set. Give it a title. So it's our development catch up with the team. I'm going to bring in Nestor and a few others, and I'll add my required attendees. This is nothing out of the ordinary. We can use Teams to do this as we could use, of course, Outlook, which most people are using. But there is an option here at the bottom, add an agenda that others can edit, because we may before have dropped into type details for our new meeting and started to write out all of our agenda that comes through on the invitation. But actually clicking this link, you'll see the loop icon that's getting things ready at the bottom now allows us to have a section that's dedicated to the meeting. This will include the agenda, the meeting notes and follow-up tasks. Now in here, we can now begin set our agenda. What we can also do is tag relevant people that may also be in the meeting. They will also get a notification. They get an email if you're going to tag them in that way for a loop notification. But here, if I was to say @Nestor, and I'll go ahead and just look for Nestor with the @, and we can say, effectively, we'll be reviewing the DevOps. Okay. Now, meeting notes, well, we don't actually have any yet, so there's nothing to add there. And there are no follow-up tasks right now to be done. Now, as you can see, it does say people you mentioned will only see components shared with them, and they won't be notified until you grant them access. Click to resolve. Well, I'll click to provide Nestor access. My Teams app is running slow on this. I tried this earlier, took a little bit of time to catch up. But importantly, you will also see on the right-hand side, there is an option to hide meeting notes on the actual invite. So if you don't want to bring this into the invite, so don't really see that, you can click that and hide it away until the meeting starts. Okay, so you have that capability. If I now go ahead and then send out this meeting, it's much like any other Teams meeting now that's in the diary for the relevant people to attend. They join in the exact same way that we would do today. Click into the meeting through Teams or go through Outlook, whatever their experience, it'll go through in the same way. And if I go ahead and join this meeting that we've set up, we should also see, as long as I'm not doing it too quickly, is the meeting notes tab will open. If I've done it too quick, I will, I've got another one I can show you, but there we go. Just teased it open because I think I sent it within like 10 seconds of saving it. But on the right-hand side, you can now see meeting notes capability, and we actually see Nestor will be reviewing the DevOps. And as we go through our meeting, well, we can actually begin adding meeting notes. So you might say, you know, Nestor mentioned DevOps progress and all positive. So these aren't just my notes now that we are actually capturing. This is a shared area that later we'll be able to pick up again, so really powerful to use here. And we can also add follow-up tasks because, in this meeting, we needed to assign a task and Miriam needs to pick up one of those code changes. So here I could put a task is to update the HTML code assigned to, and I can now search for one of my colleagues, being Miriam, and I can also set a due date as well. So in that way, these follow-up tasks are effectively going to synchronize with Microsoft ToDo as well. So they actually will follow up later and give that person a task. And you might say, well, why bother with this? Well, actually, what it's doing is preventing the need for rework, preventing the need after for you to go in and start allocating tasks and send follow-up emails saying, can you pick up that next week? Follow up with them. By tagging them here, bringing them into these meeting notes, you're allocating a task, which will be then synchronized through ToDo using the capability of that task list that we've seen earlier in Loop as well. So with this now done, we could go ahead and check off the agenda point that we've actually completed. And I could go ahead and then end our Teams meeting in the same way that we would do normally. So that now has ended. But we now, of course, appreciate that that meeting notes section was powered by Loop. So if we went back into our development catch-up and we took a look at this here, you now see visibly how that meeting notes section has changed. We cleared one of the agenda points. We add in a meeting note, and I gave a follow-up task to Miriam as well, which would now filter through into Microsoft ToDo. So quite powerful in how those meeting notes work. So I could come back into them from this meeting invitation. But equally, if, of course, they have access to this component, there is other ways now in Teams that we can get back to this easily. And this is really another tip. Inside of Teams, we have effectively an app that you can search for called Meet. I'll go into the Meet app inside of Teams. And in here, you can actually see on the meetings that we've had, there are now a link back to the meeting notes inside of that Meet app. So I can click into the agenda and notes, and I can then load up this Loop page with our meeting notes, one I created earlier, this is, but you can easily get back to them through the Meet app. So bring in Meet is actually, outside of Loop, what I would just say about the Meet app, it's a fairly kind of new, I think it's a bit of a facelift really in recent times, is for me, it works really well because it's also a great way to get back to all of your meeting recordings. If you've recorded any meetings, you can do a filter on recorded. You can actually click on view recap and you can play the recording straight from there. Daryl, over to you.
Yeah, it's just looking at Meet. It almost looks like that browse by feature that's part of OneDrive now, where you can browse files and meetings from that. Do you reckon it looks a bit like that?
It pretty much is that really in a way. I think they've mirrored the UI, and I think this is mainly delivered through the experience of delivering Teams Premium, because this is where also you get your recap capability from your transcripts. Because, if you think back into when we had recordings and meetings, the old way we used to say to people is, well, hey, you'll have it in your chat area. Pick it up from your calendar feed, go into the meeting and find it again. Actually, that kind of grates on people because it's not natural way to kind of click through all of the old meetings. But actually, this Meet app is really quite positive because it also shows your meetings coming up. And, if you are running late or you need to send a message to the participant, you have quick access to do so without going anywhere near Outlook in that way. Running late, and there you go. I'm running late, guys, sorry. And that's all powered by that capability through the Meet app. So they are very, very similar. If I click into the meeting we had where I recorded one before, go into the catch-up, you effectively will then see the recording. And if I had Teams Premium, well, I'd be seeing more stuff down the right-hand side, right? But you can see that this is quite powerful to use from the Meet app, both from meeting notes, but also I do think Meet, for me now, has become my go-to for upcoming meetings and meetings that have happened in the past. Excellent. So I know I've covered quite a bit in a short amount of time there in terms of Loop capabilities, but very much as we kind of just kind of consider where we've gone in this kind of Loop journey. Well, we've actually considered right from the off can we create a page in Loop to generate an idea? Yeah, we've done that. We can bring it into a workspace you can newly create and share with colleagues. Yep, be able to bring that in. We've also then considered, well, if Loop doesn't do project planning, can we integrate with other apps to do so? And we've seen the ability to bring in Planner, Trello, and also create a task list, which links into Microsoft ToDo as well. So we brought in our planning capabilities. We've also then had a look at bringing in content like the project spec that I can actually bring and copy and paste into Outlook or Teams. And also that is available in Word Online as well to have the same capabilities, edit in place, and sync that content back into our Loop content. And then we've looked at meeting minutes, either from the template, but we've also equally done that inside of the Microsoft Teams app. And we scheduled our meeting to provide that dialogue on the right-hand side to capture those in a meeting, share them after, but also we can bring those back into our workspace via Add to Workspace or find them via the Teams Meet app. So quite a bit to digest, right? But hopefully that gives you this idea of, well, can Loop help power my projects? Yes. You can see how it can all come together and save you a lot of time when it comes to managing those projects and bring it all into one place. Excellent. So I will stop sharing at this point, but I'm happy to, answer any questions. I know Daryl, you were answering them anyway has been going, but hopefully you all found that informative.
Yeah, just welcome anyone who wants to come off mute. Just raise your hand and answer your questions or pass your comments as well. There's been plenty of great conversation in the chat and in true community fashion, helping each other out. But yeah, raise your hand and pass comments. I do have a question for Scott if no one raises their hand within 20 or 30 seconds. That's quite specific.
There's no pressure there.
No. Come on, you've only got 25 seconds now. Come on, raise your hands.
You can ask the question. Why anyone uses the chat now? That I can always answer that question, Darren, as well. So yeah, what's the question? We'll allow anyone to type in the chat as well.
Yeah. No, sometimes it is like that. There's a good discussion thread, if I can call it that, in chat. Where Lizzie Snyman is asking about relational ways of sharing content and referring to things in the Loop workspace. I think she's got some good questions there, which we all do have, about how do you simply share and make sure that everyone can access that content or discover insights. And if you've been a Notion user, also that thinking of, well, everything is a database, whereas in Loop everything is a page. What do you know? What can you share there in terms of your thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, it's certainly not as simple as a group or team was. That's a summary point, right? I think in a way, of course, we're looking at this through the lens of a new type of architecture built really on sharing links. I guess it's one of those to consider that we do need to be aware of a couple of points, at least, that come straight to my mind. And we could probably have like another hour session just getting into the detail here. But very much the workspace and your workspace members are, of course, not associated to the team or group you may be working in. So mirroring those is really important, because you're going to find them out of sync can grate on people if they can't access the workspace and just don't see it. Equally, when you're looking at the sharing link capability and creating those components, I'd obviously be cautious sometimes on the type of sharing link you're going to create. Maybe you're considering that very much the content you're creating as a project or a project spec is very sensitive, so you may not want to create that as a org-wide sharing link. I know it's super easy to do that and just paste it in for ease and not add your colleagues in, but being aware again that if we are using sharing capability, we should, where possible, start considering it is an org-wide sharing link the right way to share a component, and therefore taking the security as well outside of your workspace, so to speak. You're going to create a different security model. So it is a more of a complex topic in a way, and I think this comes back to good training and user comms and understanding of what is the right type of sharing link when you're creating components. And that Loop will follow your default SharePoint sharing link setup. So if you put default sharing link is org wide, Loop's handily going to follow that. That doesn't always mean it's the right way, let's call it that. So I think it's just something you really need to think wider about, and user comms and understanding is super important when it comes to this.
Yeah, definitely. I see in the chat too, there's an interest in having a topic which focuses in on Loop and knowledge management and concerns and things to consider, I think, around that. So that would be a good focus area, which maybe I'll put it out there to people on the call. If you're interested in preparing some thoughts or content or collaborating with a couple of others in the Loop user group to pull that together, that'd be great to cover it. And remember too, we do have a LinkedIn group that we are trying to use it as a group for discussion, not just advertising and dropping things in. So if you have questions like that or things that you want to discuss, do start the conversation. And we do have some very helpful people that like to interact and get that discussion going. Yeah, but look, I know we're coming close to time, and thank you all for coming along to today's session. It's been really good to hear Scott put that all together in a really crisp, understandable way. There's a lot that's happening in this space. We've seen collaborative notes being so powerful with introducing Loop to people who perhaps haven't even seen or used it, and they start to understand some of its usefulness and capability. But task management, project management is another area that, as Scott has said today, it's not like it's trying to fill all the gaps, but it is providing that smorgasbord or that canvas. The image I think of is being able to walk into a virtual project room that we sometimes have in our workspaces, and you've got everything that's related to the project on the walls, and you can just get that sense of what's going on, like a war room. Yeah, so great topic, Scott. Fantastic. Thank you for your time, and the opportunities there again for anyone else who would like to share or talk on a topic like this. We do have a mix of formats. Sometimes we talk a bit like 25, 30 minutes or so, and then do breakout groups, or sometimes we dive deep into topics like this. So it has been good. I will say we will put something on the calendar for the next user group shortly after Microsoft Ignite. I'm sure you'll all be looking at what's coming out there and what is Loop going to do, and we'll have some good thoughts and reactions from that after Ignite. So look out for that as I promote the next meetup after Ignite.
Maybe before that Copilot, maybe at that point I'd be interested to know more about it.
Yeah. Copilot, yes. I've never heard of it.
News to me.
Large language what? Yeah. Right. Well, thanks everyone. It's been good having you. I'll end it there. We'll post the recording up on my YouTube channel, trim a few things just to make it a bit easier to consume. I maybe even drop in some chapters. But again, thank you, Scott, for your time and your expertise. And see you in the LinkedIn group as we chat and at the next meetup.